My aunt pressed an envelope into my hand at my grandmother's funeral and said, "She made me promise to give you this the day she died." I looked down at it. My name, Cora, was written in my grandmother's handwriting, shaky and thin, the way it had been for the last few years of her life. My stepfather was standing 10 feet away talking to the pastor. He glanced over at me, then at the envelope. Something crossed his face, just for a second, and then it was gone. I didn't open it until that night. I wish I had opened it sooner. I wish I had opened it years ago. But I also think a part of me already knew, somewhere deep down, that whatever was inside that envelope was going to change everything. And I wasn't ready for everything to change. Not yet. My father died when I was 9 years old. I don't talk about him much because it still hurts in a way that doesn't really have words. He was a contractor. He built houses for a living, spent his weekends coaching my little league team even though I was terrible at it, made the best pancakes I've ever eaten in my life. He died in a car accident on a Tuesday morning in March, on his way to a job site. I remember my mom getting the phone call. I remember the sound she made. He had a life insurance policy. I know this now. At the time, I was 9, and nobody tells a 9-year-old anything. My mom remarried 2 years later. His name was Frank, my stepfather, and at first I wanted to like him. I really did. He was friendly, easy to talk to, the kind of man who remembered to ask follow-up questions. How did that test go? Did your team win? My mom seemed lighter around him, happier, and I wanted my mom to be happy. But then they got married, and things shifted in ways that were hard to name at first. He had a daughter from his first marriage. Her name was Priya. She was a year younger than me. We were both in middle school when Frank and my mom got together. And from the very beginning, it was clear that Priya existed in a different category than I did. It wasn't dramatic. That's the thing about this kind of favoritism. It's rarely dramatic. It's quiet. It's who gets their permission slip signed first. It's whose recital gets put on the family calendar. It's whose college brochures get left on the kitchen table with sticky notes on them. It's who gets the bigger bedroom when we moved into the new house. She needs more space. She has all her art supplies. Okay, sure, I told myself it didn't matter. Priya and I weren't close, but we weren't enemies either. We existed in parallel, polite and distant. I had my mom. That was enough. Except my mom changed too, slowly, in ways I didn't want to admit. She deferred to Frank on everything. The budget, the decisions, the plans, and Frank's decisions always tilted toward Priya. By high school, I had learned to stop asking for things. New soccer cleats when mine fell apart? I waited until they were nearly unwearable, then bought used ones at a Goodwill 2 towns over. Prom dress. I found one at a consignment shop, $28, hunter green, and I told everyone I'd picked it intentionally. School trip to Washington, D.C. I skipped it. Said I wasn't interested. I was extremely interested. I just knew what the answer would be. Priya got a car for her 16th birthday. A used one, sure. A Honda Civic, maybe 5 years old. But still, a car. I turned 16 and got a card with a $25 gift card to Target inside. Frank signed it with a smiley face. I got a part-time job at a sandwich shop the summer I was 15, and I never stopped working after that. I worked through high school, through every summer, stacking up hours and tips and slowly saving money in an account I'd opened myself at a credit union down the street, because I didn't trust leaving my money anywhere Frank could see it. I'm not sure why I felt that way. I just did. College was the first time I felt like I could breathe. I got into a state school 3 hours away. Not my first choice, but I got a partial scholarship, and I figured out financial aid on my own, sitting at the kitchen table with the FAFSA website open and nobody helping me. My mom asked once if I needed anything. I said no, partly because I didn't want help from Frank, partly because I'd already learned not to expect it. Priya went to a private university in Boston. Frank and my mom paid for it, full tuition, room and board, a monthly allowance. I know this because Priya mentioned it casually once during a Christmas break. The way you mention things when you've never had to think about money. Dad pays my credit card bill at the end of each month, so I didn't have to stress. She wasn't bragging. That was the worst part. She just didn't know. I took out loans. I worked 25 hours a week during the school year and 40 plus every summer. I graduated in 4 years with a degree in accounting and $34,000 in debt, and I remember sitting at graduation thinking, I did this. Nobody helped me, and I did this. And I was proud, and I was also so tired. I moved to Charlotte after graduation, got a junior accountant position at a mid-sized firm, found an apartment with a roommate, started chipping away at my loans. I was careful with money, the way people are careful with money when they've never had a safety net, tracking every grocery receipt, buying store brand everything, never going out for dinner unless someone else was paying. I called my mom every Sunday. I visited for holidays. I was polite to Frank. I never told about money. My grandmother, my dad's mother, lived in a small house in Raleigh, North Carolina. We visited her every summer when I was little before Dad died. After the accident, Mom still took me a few times, but once Frank came into the picture, those trips mostly stopped. Too far, too expensive, too complicated with schedules. I kept in touch with Grandma on my own. Birthday cards, phone calls, the occasional weekend visit when I could afford the drive. She was sharp and funny, and she made the same lemon pound cake every time I came, and she always asked about my job and my apartment and whether I was eating enough vegetables. She never asked about Frank. She got sick 2 years ago. Slowly at first, then faster. I drove down to see her as often as I could. I was there 3 weeks before she died. That last visit, she held my hand for a long time without saying anything. Then she said, Cora, I need you to know that your father loved you more than anything in this world, and he wanted to take care of you. He tried to. I thought she meant emotionally. I thought she meant the memory of him, the way fathers who die young still take care of their children through the stories people tell and the values they leave behind. I said, I know, Grandma. I know he did. She squeezed my hand. She looked like she wanted to say something else. But she was tired and I let her sleep. She died 11 days later. My aunt, my dad's younger sister, gave me the envelope at the reception afterward in the parish hall while people were eating finger sandwiches and speaking in quiet voices. She made me promise, my aunt said. Her eyes were red. She didn't want to give it to you while she was still alive because she was afraid of what would happen. She was afraid of him. She glanced toward Frank. I took the envelope home. Inside was a letter, 4 pages, handwritten, and a copy of a document I didn't recognize at first. Dense legal language, a lot of numbers. It took me a few minutes of reading before I understood what I was looking at. My father had a life insurance policy worth $400,000. When he died, that money was placed in a trust in my name, specifically for me, to be released on my 25th birthday. The trustee was listed as my mother. Co-trustee, my mother's attorney at the time. I was 31 years old. I sat on my apartment floor and read the letter 3 times. My grandmother had found out about the trust when I was 17, not from my mother, but from my father's attorney, who had reached out because something in the paperwork had triggered a routine audit. She had confronted my mom about it. My mom had cried and promised to tell me when I turned 25. Grandma had believed her. When my 25th birthday came and went without a word, Grandma had hired her own attorney. What they found? The trust had been accessed repeatedly over the years. The original $400,000, invested from 2002 onward, should have grown to somewhere between $900,000 and $1.1 million by my 25th birthday. By the time Grandma's attorney got a full accounting, the trust held $47,000. The rest had been withdrawn. Expenses, the document said, educational costs, family maintenance, healthcare. The withdrawals started the year Frank and my mom got married. They didn't stop until 2 years before I turned 25, by which point there was barely anything left to take. Priya's college tuition, I thought. The kitchen renovation. Frank's boat, He bought a fishing boat when I was 19, and I remember thinking it seemed like a lot of money for people who always acted like money was tight. The vacations, the car, my car. My father paid for the used Honda Civic they gave Priya on her 16th birthday. My dead father's life insurance policy paid for it, and they gave it to his stepdaughter, not his daughter. I sat on that floor for a long time. I called my aunt the next morning. She had more to tell me. She had been sitting on it for months, waiting until after Grandma's death, following the exact instructions in the letter. There was a second attorney, one Grandma had retained specifically to act on my behalf, and he had already built a case file. He was waiting for my call. His name was Mr. Kerman Okafor. He'd been practicing estate litigation for 22 years. When I walked into his office the following week, he slid a folder across the desk and gave me a moment to look through it. The case was clear, he said. What my stepfather and my mother had done was not a gray area. Misappropriation of trust funds, breach of fiduciary duty, potentially fraud, depending on how the withdrawals had been documented. You have standing to sue, he said. And based on what we found, you would likely win. I asked him what that would mean practically. They would have to repay the trust. With interest, accounting for investment growth, we're looking at somewhere between $800,000 and $1.1 million. The court would also likely award attorney's fees. I thought about my $34,000 in student loans. I thought about the used cleats, the consignment prom dress, the skip school trip. I thought about sitting at the kitchen table alone with the FAFA website, nobody helping me, while Priya's dad called her credit card company once a month. Okay, I said. We gave my mom and Frank 2 weeks' notice before filing. Mr. Okafor sent a certified letter. It was professional, measured, and completely devastating in the way that legal language can be devastating. All those numbers laid out plainly, no emotion, just fact after fact after fact. My mom called me the day she received it. I let it go to voicemail. She called 6 more times over the next 3 days. On the 4th day, she showed up at my apartment. I stood in the doorway. I didn't invite her in. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her eyes were swollen. She said she was sorry. She said Frank had convinced her it was the right thing, that the money was just sitting there and the family needed it, that she'd planned to pay it back. She said she hadn't realized how much they'd taken. She said she thought of it as borrowing. I listened to all of it. Then I said, Mom, my father died. He worked his whole life and he took out a life insurance policy so that if something happened to him, I would be okay. He did that for me, and you took it. She started crying. He did that for me, I said again. And I spent the last 12 years working 3 jobs and eating ramen and skipping things I wanted and taking out loans I'm still paying off, while Priya's father, your husband, went to her college graduation with a check in his pocket and didn't think about me once. And that check was my money. She said she didn't know what to say. I know, I said. That's why Mr. Okafor is handling it. I closed the door. Frank called once, just once. He didn't leave a voicemail. I figured he'd talked to his own attorney by then. The thing about Frank is that I don't think he ever thought of himself as a bad person. I genuinely believe that. He thought of it as redistributing resources within a household, as taking care of his family, as making practical decisions about money that was just sitting in an account doing nothing. That his stepdaughter had paid for it didn't really penetrate, because he never really thought of me as fully real. Not the way Priya was real to him. That's the most painful part, actually. Not the money. The money is enormous, and the money matters, and I want every cent back. But the more painful thing is just the ordinariness of it. How easy it was for him to simply not consider me. How 12 years of my life, 12 years of struggling and scraping and feeling like something was wrong but not knowing what, or just the background noise of decisions he made without losing a minute of sleep. Priya reached out 3 weeks after the lawsuit was filed. We'd never been close. I didn't expect to hear from her. She sent me a text message that just said, Cora. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I believed her. I still do. Priya had been handed things her whole life and had no reason to wonder where they came from. She wasn't cruel, she was just unexamined. That's different. I texted back, I know, it's not your fault. That was true too. The case settled 8 months later. My mother and Frank did not have $900,000 in liquid assets. Nobody expected them to. What they had was a house with equity, retirement accounts, and Frank's small business. The settlement required them to liquidate the equity in their home and make structured payments over 5 years for the remainder. The total, with interest and legal fees, came to just over $870,000. I will not pretend that felt like justice exactly. Justice would have been my father not dying at all. Justice would have been someone checking in when I was 17 and the money was already being spent. Justice would have been my mother choosing differently. But it was something. Mr. O'Corge called me the afternoon the settlement was finalized. He said congratulations in his careful, measured way. I sat in my car in the parking garage outside my office and I cried for about 15 minutes. Not happy crying, not relief crying, just the kind of crying where your body has been holding something for a long time and finally puts it down. Then I wiped my face, went back to my desk, and finished the quarterly report I'd been working on. I used part of the money to pay off my student loans. The whole $34,000 gone in one afternoon, which sounds like it should feel dramatic, and it actually felt surreal in a very quiet way, like removing a splinter you've had so long you forgot it wasn't supposed to be there. I also bought an apartment, mine, outright, in a neighborhood I'd always walked through and never imagined living in. The closing was on a Thursday in November, and I sat in that empty living room afterward with a cup of coffee and I thought about my dad. I thought about him building houses. I thought about how that's what he did. Built things for people to live in. He built something for me too, even after he was gone. A policy, a trust, a plan. He tried. He tried. That's what Grandma said at the end. I understand it now. I set aside $50,000 in a separate account. I spent 2 months researching nonprofits that provide educational support for kids in single-parent households, tutoring, school supplies, scholarship funds. I split it between 3 organizations. It was not a grand gesture. It wasn't supposed to be. It was just me thinking about the 15-year-old version of myself buying used cleats and wishing someone had been paying attention. I still call my aunt every few weeks. She sends me lemon pound cake at Christmas, made from Grandma's recipe, and I eat it standing over the kitchen counter and let myself miss her. My mom texted me 6 months after the settlement. Just, I think about you every day. I hope you know I love you. I read it several times. I didn't respond. I'm not there yet. Maybe I will be someday. Forgiveness, I've come to understand, doesn't have to happen on anyone else's timeline. It doesn't have to happen at all. What I know is that I'm not carrying anger the way I used to. Not that hot, constant, confusing anger that I felt for years without being able to name what it was about. That's gone, or mostly gone. What I have instead is clarity. My father loved me. He planned for me. He did everything he could. And for a long time, the people who were supposed to protect what he left behind decided that their comfort was worth more than my future. They were wrong. And now I know it. And now I have a home, and no debt, and a filing cabinet with every document from the settlement in a clearly labeled folder, and a coffee maker that cost more than $30, which sounds like a small thing and is actually not small at all. I'm 31 years old. I have my whole life in front of me. My dad would be proud of me. I really believe that. I'm starting to be proud of me too. I've thought a lot about what it actually means when people say, you reap what you sow. Not in any religious sense. I don't mean that. I mean it in the plainest, most practical way. The choices you make compound over time, the same way money does. Frank and my mother made a choice early on. A small one maybe, the first time. Just a withdrawal, just once. And then it got easier, because it had already been done once and nothing bad had happened. That's how it works. Not with a dramatic decision, but with a quiet series of small ones, each one made possible by the last. And the same is true on the other side. Every shift I worked at the sandwich shop when I was 15, Every loan payment I made on time. Every month I chose the cheaper apartment, the store brand groceries, the consignment rack. None of those felt like strength in the moment. They felt like survival. But they were building something too. Not money, not then. Something harder to name. A kind of self-knowledge. The knowledge that I could handle hard things because I had handled hard things over and over without anyone catching me. That's what I keep coming back to. I didn't know about the trust fund. I didn't know my father had tried to protect me. I thought I was just unlucky. Born into a family that didn't prioritize me. Wired wrong somehow. Not the kind of person things came easily to. And so I worked harder. Not because I knew justice was coming. I worked harder because there was no other option. And that stubbornness, that refusal to stop, is the thing that carried me through to the other side of all of it. There's a version of this story where I find out about the trust at 25 as I was supposed to, and maybe I make different choices. Maybe I don't develop the muscle memory of self-reliance. Maybe I don't learn how to read a financial statement or negotiate a lease or eat well on $40 a week. I'm not grateful for what Frank and my mother did. I want to be very clear about that. What they did was wrong and they're paying for it, and I feel no guilt about that. But I also know that the person I became in those 12 years, the person who walked into Mr. Okafor's office and said, okay, without flinching, that person was built in the gap they created. Intelligence isn't just what you know. It's what you figure out when nobody hands you the answer. And integrity isn't just following the rules when it's easy. It's doing the right thing when the wrong thing would be so much simpler, when no one is watching, when you're tired and underpaid and eating ramen at a kitchen table that isn't even yours. I did the right thing, quietly, for 12 years. Frank didn't. That difference matters. It compounds. My dad built houses. He also built a plan for me, carefully, before he died, because that's the kind of man he was, the kind who thought ahead, who took responsibility seriously, who understood that love is something you demonstrate, not just something you say. I didn't get to grow up knowing that, but I know it now. And knowing it changes something in me that I don't have a precise word for. It makes me want to be that kind of person too. The kind who plans, who protects, who follows through even when they're not around to see it. I'm 31. I have a home. I have no debt. I have a filing cabinet and a coffee maker and a savings account that doesn't make me nervous to look at. My father tried. I didn't quit. That's the whole story, really.